e-juice. It essentially is vaping. Now you're probably like, wait, there's mods and there's RDAs and there's pod mods and But really, when it boils down to it, e-juice is what we go after. It's what has the substance that keeps us away from combustible cigarettes. So e-juice is sort of most of vaping. I think a lot of times we don't think of it that way, especially people that are really into the hobbyist side. We think a lot of RDAs and squonk mods and mechanical mods and mechanical tube mods and coils and mesh strips and things of that nature. But really, when it comes down to it, e-juice sort of is vaping. So when it comes to that, what happens when the FDA comes out and says no more flavor for you? And tobacco control and Mike Bloomberg get exactly what they want, and vaping is destroyed across the United States. Well, essentially what happens then is it's all on you. Companies of any sort really can't help out anymore. So with that in mind is why I decided to do the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Vaporverse, which is my series on DIY in the realm of vaping. So everything DIY, from DIY eliquid making to coil building to maybe something else a little ways down the road. That is, if myself and a couple other individuals involved can actually work the logistics out, bang it all out, and actually present it to where it will be understandable, which is asking a lot from us. But that's going to be down the road in the future. So right now, what can we look at? Well, I would like to start with DIY e-liquid and what all do you need to get started. So what do you need to get started? Well, you're going to need VG or vegetable glycerin, PG or propylene glycol, flavorings, and substance that shall not be named on YouTube. Now, if you go over to the Vaporworks Lab channel on Odyssey, there will be a short video over there entitled Substance That Shall Not Be Named on YouTube. Like literally, that's what it's titled as. And it'll go over how you get your hands on said substance and how you store that substance long term. There are still a handful of companies out there that are willing to ship said substance to residential customers. They're all fully PACT Act compliant, so as long as you're okay with being there when it arrives, showing your ID and signing for it, they're okay with shipping to you. So yeah, go over there, check that out. I'll wait. You back? Cool. All right. So next up on the list of things you need is VG and PG, right? All right, well, here in a little bit, I'm going to name about 5 websites that are going to be basically the only websites, for the most part, that you're ever going to need to order flavorings from. They also sell VG and PG, and there's a lot of people that swear by the VG and PG that those sites sell. My issue with them is, for the most part, the largest size that they sell is 1 liter. I'd like to have more than that around. I don't know why, but it just makes me worry a little bit less, I think. So my recommendation is just go over to Amazon. If you go over to Amazon, you can find vegetable glycerin and propylene glycol in gallon containers. And for the most part, VG is like $25 to $35 for a gallon, and PG is $30 to $40 for a gallon. So it's really not that expensive for the amount that you're getting. Also, you will run through your VG in half the time you will your PG. So every time it comes around to re-up, I don't know why I'm doing the air quotes, but for some reason I thought it would be just dumb enough to be funny, but it's not, so I'll quit. So yeah, you'll run through your VG in half the time you will your PG, so every time it's that time to re-up, the every other time is just going to be VG. So it's going to be buying both, buying VG, buying both, buying VG. So it's really even cheaper than it first sounds in your head. All right, so you got your VG and your PG ordered now. So what else do you need? Flavors. I mentioned 5 sites that you could go to for flavors. These are probably the only 5 sites you'll really ever need to order flavorings from, except there might be a few that you need to go to the actual manufacturer's website. And there's one company that eventually that will be the only place that you can get their flavorings. That company is one-on-one. So at some point in the future, you're going to have to go to their site exclusively. And already right now, they have a handful of flavors you can only get on their website. All right, so out of those other 5 websites, the number one, easily Bull City Flavors. Now, Bull City Flavors has the best customer service I've probably ever experienced with a site selling anything. Their shipping is fast, and they have an absolute ton of flavors. For the most part, they're probably going to be the site you use 90 to 95% of the time. The next site is Flavor Jungle. Now, Flavor Jungle is also like Bull City in the sense that it has a ton of flavors, great customer service, and fast shipping, but Bull City kind of has most of the flavors that Flavor Jungle sells, except for a few here and there, and their Jungle Flavors line, which is, their own flavoring line. And it seems like essentially what they're doing there is they're taking a extremely popular flavor by a company and basically cloning it, but making it just a hair bit better. And for the most part, they have knocked it out of the park with everything except for maybe a handful. All right, so beyond Flavor Jungle, there is Liquid Barn. Liquid Barn really only sells their own flavorings, and for the most part, you can get all of those at Bull City. You're kind of going to see a trend of, well, yeah, but Bull City. And it's just sort of the way it is. But they also sell a ton of one-shots. If you don't know what a one-shot is, it's essentially a recipe in a bottle. So all you have to do is add VG, PG, and substance that shall not be named on YouTube, and you're ready to vape. Most, if not all, of the one-shots that are sold on Liquid Barn's site are Wayne's one-shots. Wayne is the guy that does the DIY or Die Network. If you don't know what that is, search on YouTube for DIY or Die and subscribe to the first channel that pops up. The DIY or Die channel, it's really more of a network actually, because it has all of Wayne's stuff. He live streams 3 days a week, and then he has a ton of videos from the past that is like this gigantic library of Alexandria for DIY e-liquid. But there's also shows like Noted, and Noted is where these 3 people, it's Dave, Emily, and Sam, they choose a profile. So say Cherry. I don't know why I chose that. It's like the worst profile for vape. But let's say Cherry. And then they buy as many flavorings in Cherry as they can possibly find. And then they rate them from worst to first. So it's really an outstanding resource in that you can save yourself from buying a horrible flavor that you will never use. So definitely check out Noted from the DIY or Die Network. Also, there is a couple of other channels that are associated with DIY or Die, like Mix and Vixens and Developed. And they're great channels because it's really just a group of mixers kind of going over different recipes, talking about different tips and tricks, so to speak, with mixing. So it's a huge resource to kind of learn a lot of things that you would have to learn by trial and error. You can learn without ever having to go through those errors. You can learn from their vast experience. Both of them are great channels. Make sure you look up Developed. And when you look up Developed DIY on YouTube, and you'll find it. Its channel symbol is, I think it's like 3 triangles kind of inside of each other. And you'll know you found it. And the Mix and Vixens, you just search for that and you'll find it. All right, so after Liquid Barn, now that we've said all that, just remember on Liquid Barn, primary reason you're going there is either the Liquid Barn flavors that Bull City doesn't sell, or you're there for Wayne and the DIY or Die Network one-shots. All right, so beyond Liquid Barn, there would be DIY Vapor Supply. Now, DIY Vapor Supply carries a lot of kind of these smaller or out on the fringe flavors like Hanson, Medicine Flower. There's a few others. Was it Phoenix Flavor, something like that. It's a lot of these kind of smaller companies or companies you don't see on a lot of other sites, but they also sell a ton of one-on-one flavors still. So the main reason that I use DIY Vapor Supply right now is they carry a bunch of one-on-one flavors. And then anytime I want a Hanson flavor, I'll go to DIY Vapor Supply. All right, beyond that, there is the Sam's Club of the vaping DIY e-liquid website, and that is Chef's Flavors. Chef's Flavors is based over in the UK, so the prices are a little bit higher, and the shipping takes longer, obviously, coming across the Atlantic. But the thing is Chef's has everything. So if you can't find a flavor on Chef's, then more than likely you probably shouldn't be vaping it. It probably has something in it you shouldn't be vaping. That's essentially how I look at it. But if you can't find anything on the first 4 sites, then Chef's is gonna have it for the most part. There's very few flavors they don't have, unless it's just one of those that's kind of been deemed, hey, that might be a little dangerous to vape or use. So yeah, those are the sites that you need for finding all your flavors. Alright, we've got our VGPG, our substance that shall not be named on YouTube, and we've got our flavors. What else do you need? You're going to need a kitchen scale, one like this. The best kitchen scale that's out there is the AWS LB501. Right now, for some reason, it's extremely hard to find. You can get it directly off of AWS's website, but it's going to cost you double what it would cost if you could find it on Amazon or Walmart or Target. Now, when mine kind of went kaput and quit working, I went on Amazon and looked up kitchen scales, and then I looked through kitchen scales and made sure they had this T button right here. This is a tare button. What it is essentially is it allows you to zero out wherever you're at in weight. So if you put in one ingredient's weight, then you can just hit tare and zero it out and just put exactly the weight of the next one instead of having to do math as you go up and try and keep track of all that in one big nightmare. But I found this one. This is from Kitchen Tour. It cost about $15 on Amazon. Starting out, I wanted to make sure if I'm going from a LB501 that has been fantastic for years to something else, I wanted to start out cheap and make sure I wasn't spending a ton of money on something that ended up being junk. Now, when you buy a kitchen scale, the big thing for DIY e-liquid, you want to make sure that it will weigh down to 0.01 grams. That is extremely important because a lot of recipes are going to have small amounts of certain flavors, and it's going to come out to, maybe 0.09 or something similar. And if the scale won't weigh down like that, you're kind of shit out of luck, or you're going to have to use something like a syringe and view the ingredient in milliliters to get it that accurate. All right, beyond the scale, what do you need? You're going to need a ton of these right here. These are tester bottles. This is a 15 ml bottle. I got it off of Amazon. You can find packs of these right here that come in 50 packs. They're around $10. They also have 75 packs that are around $12 or $13. Now, the flavoring sites that I mentioned before, they all sell tester bottles and 30 ml bottles, 60 ml bottles, 120 ml bottles. Problem is they are all this type of plastic right here, like any commercial e-liquid you've ever bought. Now, if you use them multiple times, you'll notice eventually that there'll be a white ring around it where the plastic has started to bend. It's kind of bad in DIY because you want to be able to reuse the bottle as many times as you want. So that kind of plastic really kind of sucks. Plus, the dropper tops on those bottles are extremely hard to get off and back on without damaging the top. So these right here work perfect. For the tester bottles, it has kind of this dripper top right here. This is actually made for eyedropper solution. But the actual dropper top itself is really easy to get off and back on. I know I just made a grimace face, but that was more because I thought I was about to fling it across the room. All right. I will get one of those big 50 packs of those anytime it becomes time to re-up on tester bottles. But I haven't had to do that in a long time because this type of plastic here, this white plastic you see, it's kind of a white transparent. Sometimes it comes in multiple colors, but this is a very durable type of plastic. It will last from use to use to use for a long time. I will also buy some 60 ml bottles, probably about 4 or 5. I don't buy any 30 ml bottles anymore. You could be different, I'm not sure. But I don't buy 30 ml bottles anymore because if I've tested something in a 15 ml bottle and I like it, then I'm going to want to mix it up minimum to 60 mils. 30 mils just seems to go pretty fast, and then I'm just mixing it up again. So 60 mils is kind of the minimum for me outside of a tester. So I'll get 4 or 5 60 ml bottles of the same type of plastic, and then I'll get these. These are 4-ounce bottles, so it's not quite 120 mils, but it's pretty damn close. I think it comes out to like 118 milliliters. But again, it's this same type of plastic, but it has this kind of condiment style head. It lets you unscrew it and kind of control just how much you're going to let out regardless of how hard you're squeezing. So you can either open it all the way and it's just a big pour, or you can kind of close it down a little bit and you'd really have to squeeze on it to get that big pour kind of feature going. So I'll buy those, and then I'll also get a bunch of 8-ounce and then a like 6-pack of 16-ounce bottles. The 16-ounce bottles look like this right here. Now, this is actually made for condiments like ketchup or mustard or whatever, but I use them for my PG, VG, and substance that shall not be named on YouTube. Basically to make it easier when I'm kind of weighing it out into my bottles. And I get the 8-ounce ones because when I find something that's really going to become an all-day vape of mine, I generally mix up a lot of it, but I don't hardly ever go over 8 ounces, which is kind of close to about 240 milliliters. Okay, so beyond those bottles, is there anything else that you could possibly need to get started in DIY? Well, some people like syringes. I'm not sure what that is, but there's actually been God knows how many Reddit arguments over what's more accurate, a scale that goes down to 0.01 grams or a syringe. And I'm not trying to get in that argument at all. But some people like syringes. They will actually look at the recipe and the recipe laid out in milliliters, not grams, and they'll weigh out smaller amounts in milliliters using a syringe. You can get disposable syringes or reusable small syringes on Amazon. They're extremely cheap. If you want to give them a try, go for it. I almost never use syringes. Actually, I can't remember the last time I used a syringe for DIY e-liquid, but you could be very different. You might hate trying to weigh out things that are extremely low in weight on a scale like this because it's kind of iffy whether or not it's going to be 100% accurate, and you want it 100% accurate. So in that case, you'd want to use a syringe, really. Or you want to use a jeweler scale, and in that case have 2 different scales. One that is like this, that weighs down to 0.01, and then a jeweler scale, which weighs down to 0.001 grams. Problem with jeweler scales, though, is they're not great for e-liquid except for those extremely low levels because their maximum weight is always really low. So just keep that in mind before you're like, well, I'm just going to go get a jeweler scale and do all my mixing that way. I wouldn't go that route because it's not going to turn out good for you. If you can find a cheap one, like maybe a cheap pocket one, just to use for those really low amounts that give you problems on your main DIY kitchen scale, go for it. But I have never found that to be a necessity, really. You can kind of get the feeling for how much something is in terms of a drop or a small drop to where you've got it to where it's almost dripping out and you just kind of put it on the edge of the bottle and let little bit drain down. One drop is normally around 0.03, and then anything below that, kind of like I said, you'll get the feel for where to cut it off or swipe it off the side of the bottle top there to get it where you need it. But I don't ever use syringes. I just don't do that. I'm not trying to be that damn accurate, I guess. But there are some people out there that swear by them. I have never seen a DIY e-liquid show or live stream where they use syringes anymore. I just don't see it very often. Especially if, like I said, they've got one of those LB501s. That's about all you need, really. All right, so aside from syringes, is there absolutely anything else you could need starting out in DIY? Not really, and you don't really need syringes, especially starting out. That'll be something you kind of figure out later on if you actually need it or like it. So yeah, you should basically have everything that you need. And honestly, you don't have to get any of this stuff in huge quantities starting out. I would recommend the gallon of VG and gallon of PG. And if you're going to get into DIY e-liquid, a ton or as much as you can afford of substance that shall not be named. But as far as flavorings go, start out with whatever you know is your profile. If your profile is citrus flavors, just get a handful of citrus flavors and that's about it. Or maybe a couple of profiles you like, citrus and cheesecake, whatever the case may be. But just get a little bit starting out so you can kind of get your feet wet and get used to it. And then really once the bug hits you, trust me, you'll buy a lot more. Same thing with bottles. You don't have to get a ton of bottles. You could start out with, some tester bottles, a couple of 60 ml bottles, and that's it if you really wanted to. And then as you get your feet wet, get more. So yeah, just remember all the stuff I went over. The main things that you need are VG, PG, a little bit of flavorings, a ton or as much as you can afford of substance that shall not be named because you don't know when they'll stop shipping it. Kitchen scale, handful of bottles, and you're ready to go. All right, guys, that's it for me. So remember, vape on, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Still vaping on the nitrous. Vaporface!